AP Calculus, there are 5 things that the College Board would expect you to be able to do on your graphing calculator. Those are graph a function in a window, find the zeros or the x-intercepts of a function, find points of intersection for 2 different functions, find the numerical derivative, and find the definite integral. Now, when it comes to these last 2, those are very specific to calculus. And if you've never taken a calculus course before, you're not really sure what they are. And so those 2 will come. I want to take a minute now, though, to review these first 3 of graphing, finding zeros, and finding a point of intersection. To do that, I'm going to use the TI-84, and you see on the left-hand side is my keypad. In the middle on top there is going to be my window, and then down at the bottom is a key press history. So if you're wondering what key was that he just hit, you can just look back through there. So now, the first thing that we want to do if we want to graph a function is to type the function in. To do that, you go to the y equals menu, and here we have a bunch of empty equations. The first function that I'm thinking of is a rational function, so I'm going to need a fraction bar. To get a fraction bar on your graphing calculator, you hit alpha and F1, and this menu will pop up. The very first option is ND, numerator over denominator. So I'm just going to hit enter, and we get this empty fraction to fill in. For the numerator of my fraction, I'm going to use 15 minus x squared. To get down to the denominator, I use my down arrow, and my denominator is going to be x squared plus 1. Then, to graph it, we simply hit the graph button. And we get our standard -10 to +10 window. Function is in there. It looks like it curves up. There's maybe an asymptote in the middle and then curves back down again. I notice that when I look at this function, there seems to be 2 x-intercepts at about -4, and it looks like also +4. If we want to find those 2 zeros, those 2 x-intercepts, use the calculate menu. So you go second and that trace button, and you see the calculate menu is what shows up. We have 7 different options here. When we want to find the x-intercept, you go down to the second one and hit enter. Now, there's been a little bit that has changed to our screen. First of all, we have our function written on top, and then down at the bottom, our calculator is trying to ask us something. It's asking for a left bound. Now, if I want to find this -0, the negative x-intercept, I need to get to the left of that. Now, you can do that in 2 different ways. The first way is to use your left arrow and just keep hitting it until that cursor gets anywhere to the left of our x-intercept and hit enter. The calculator then asks us for a right bound. Now, to get to the right side of that x-intercept, of course, you can use your right arrow to do that. The other thing you could do is to just type in a number that's to the right of our x-intercept. Now, my x-intercept looks like it's at about -4, so maybe I type in -3 as my right bound. Notice that we have these 2 vertical dotted lines. Right? What we've just done for the calculator is to set up the boundaries, the area that we want this calculator to look for our zeros. The last thing it asks for is a guess. Now we can guess anywhere in there or even on the boundary. So if we just hit enter, it takes a second, and we find that 0 listed at the bottom to be -3.872. Let's quickly review those steps to find the 0 that's on the right side. So we're going to go second and Calc. We want to find the x-intercept, which is a 0, so we go to number 2. You can also just type in number 2. Down at the bottom, it asks for a left bound. Since I want to find the positive x-intercept, on any number to the left of that, even 0 would work. Then it asks for the right bound, so we need to get to the right of +4. So a number like 5 would work. Now our calculator is only going to look between 0 and 5 to find that x-intercept. So we hit enter one more time for our guess, and there we find our x-intercept to be 3.872. If we want to find points of intersection, we're going to need a second function. So go back to the y equals, where we enter all of our equations in. To get to the second equation, use a down arrow. And for y2, instead of having the ratio of these two quadratics, I want the product of them. So I'm going to use parentheses, 15 minus x squared, end the parentheses, and multiply it by x squared plus 1. And that parentheses, and now graph. And when we graph it, we see our first blue function is still there, and now we have this new red function. Looks like a couple of practically vertical lines. The first thing that was on our list of things to do with the graphing calculator is to graph in a specific window. I have a feeling that there's more to this picture than what we're seeing right here. So to change the window, you just go over to the window button, the second function button along the top. And we get all of our settings here. Right now it says that our minimum x value is -10 and the maximum is +10. So our x-axis goes from -10 to +10. And an x scale of 1, which means there's a tick mark at every unit along the x-axis. Now let's change that to go from -5 to +5. So we just hit -5 is our minimum x value and +5 as our maximum x value. And I'm going to leave that x scale the same. For the y coordinates, or the y-axis, let's go from -3. So I'm going to hit enter again to get down to the y minimum. And we're going to go from -3 up to 20. Once I have everything where I want it, I just hit graph again. And it redraws the graph, my first function and my second function. So that first function in blue, we noticed there was no asymptote there. It really does have a peak. And my function in red is going to kind of turn around. And instead of having just 2 points of intersection, it looks like we have 3 of them. So how do we find those points of intersection? Let's say I want to find this point of intersection that's on the left. We're going to go into the same calculate menu, second, and calculate. And option number 5 says intersect. And when we look at our screen now, we see our cursor is flashing right on the y-axis there. And it's hard to tell. Is our cursor on the first function or the second function? Well, there's a couple of clues that can help us out. First of all, right along the top, it tells us y1. So everything's written in blue. I have a feeling that cursor is on the blue function, the first one. And we can see that if we move the cursor away using our left or right arrows, the cursor follows the blue function. Notice that what the calculator is asking us down at the bottom, it asks for a first curve, trying to find the point of intersection of a couple of different curves. So we could pick the blue one or the red one as our first curve. If you did want to switch between the two, you would use your up or down arrows. And then the cursor, you notice, moves to the red function, our second function, and all of the writing turns red as well. So anyway, I'm going to let that be my first function. And I hit enter, and the cursor automatically, it marks the first function and jumps to the next one and asks for a second curve. So I'm going to hit enter again. Then it asks for a guess, and this is fairly important because I've got three different points of intersection that I'm looking for. In particular, let's find this -1, the one that's way over here on the left. I'm going to let my cursor be very close to that point and then hit enter. And we see we get that point of intersection to be -3.872. Let's kind of review that process and find that point of intersection that's in the middle. Remember, go second and calc to get our calculate menu. We want to find the point of intersection, which is the 5th option. So I type in 5. The calculator asks for the first curve. Looks like I'm on the blue curve right now, so I hit enter. My second curve is the red one. Hit enter again. And then for my guess, I'm going to move my cursor. You can't even see it moving because it's on that red curve. But I'm going to move it closer and closer to that point of intersection. There it is, that's in the middle. Right there. And hit enter one more time. And it didn't find the one that's in the middle. All right? The algorithm that it used moved that function all the way over to the one that's on the right. So how am I going to find that one that's in the middle? Well, it could be, we could just guess. I guess it's S0, and we can see. Or let's try it again, where we'll go second, F4, find that point of intersection. Our first curve is blue, our second curve is red. Now for our guess, maybe we just get it a little bit closer to that y-intercept. At maybe x is equal to 0 point, or just 0. That's kind of nice. And then we hit enter, and there it does find our intersection at being 0, 15. So that's how you enter functions in, change the window, as well as find points of intersection and zeros. One last thing before we leave, when you turn your calculator on the next time and you want to graph, we just mess with the window. And maybe you want it to be back to that regular -10 to +10. Right? One way to clean up your graphing window is to go to zoom. And here we have a bunch of options. We can draw a box and zoom into that box. We can zoom in and out. But one that's going to be very helpful for you is the standard, number 6, zoom standard. So if you hit 6, it goes back to -10 to +10 in both directions. So there you go. If you have any questions, please, please, please ask.